So we have been practicing logic, and we talked about forming conjectures. Remember, conjectures is basically forming an opinion. So before we form an opinion on any topic, we have to provide some examples, look at some examples, and do some further research. So here we have we're going to apply this to math to be able to exercise this ability, and being able to practice it with math will help us to then eventually move on to applying this in our everyday lives. So our first one says, to make a conjecture about each value or geometric relationship, we can list or draw some examples that support our opinion or our conjectures. So the first thing that they want us to look at here, it says the sum of two odd numbers. The sum of two odd numbers, can we find any pattern, for example? Is there a pattern that we can observe so that we can form an opinion based on two odd numbers that are being added together? So first thing we can do is to list examples. So let's list some examples here. Two odd numbers, let's say 1 plus 3. 1 and 3 are two odd numbers. We add them together, we get 4. Let's do another one. 1 plus 5. 1 plus 5 gives me 6. Let's do another one. 3 plus 5 gives me 8. And 4 is a charm, so let's try another one. 7 plus 9 gives me 16. So make sure that you have enough examples to be able to state a pattern. At least 4 examples would do. Our second step to analyze these would be to look for a pattern, right? So we make sure that we list our examples. We look for a pattern. Is there a pattern? Well, we notice that the sums are all even numbers. Did you notice that? So this is 4. It's an even number, even number, even number, even number. These are even numbers. All of our answers are even numbers. So what can we kind of predict based on that? What's our conjecture? Our conjecture could be then that the sum, or when we add two odd numbers, is always an even number. So this opinion doesn't necessarily mean it always holds true, but based on what I've noticed, my pattern and my examples, this is what I've noticed. This is my opinion. I think that this is always going to hold true. All right, so let's follow the same basic steps with this second one. It says the segments joining opposite vertices of a rectangle. So let's see if we can find a pattern here. So remember, our first step is to list examples, right? So I'm going to draw some rectangles. And remember, I want to do some, at least 4 examples here. And I'm going to join opposite vertices. So a vertex, I'm going to go to the opposite one like such. Here's another one, so on and so forth. We're joining the opposite vertices to each other. So as I look here, try to find a pattern, is there anything that you notice? Well, it might take you a little bit of time, but maybe if we take out a ruler and measure that line, you can notice this one seems to be, I don't know if these are inches or whatnot, but we could say this is maybe 2 centimeters here. If we go right here, it would be the same, 2 centimeters. So in this case, the diagonal lines are the same length. Maybe if we look for a pattern here, this one looks about 1 centimeter, perhaps. This would be the same or very similar, right? And we can follow that pattern and see if we can do the same thing over here. 1 centimeter, another 1 centimeter, very close. Let's try this one. This one seems to be about maybe 3. And this would also be around 3. So they're very, very close, almost the same, if you will. So because my picture's not perfect, obviously, it would be a little bit more difficult because they're not exactly the same. But if these pictures were actually printed out, you would notice that the diagonals seem to be congruent. So notice that the diagonals are the same length. We used a ruler. Diagonals are these lines that are going through the pictures. A line that connects the opposite vertices. They seem to be the same length by using a ruler. Now the same length in each rectangle. So that the diagonals are the same length in each rectangle by using a ruler. So what could be my opinion or my conjecture then? What's my conjecture? What have I noticed based on my research? Well, my conjecture could be that the segments, or those line segments, joining the opposite vertices of a rectangle, or the diagonals, are congruent. What does congruent mean? It means equal. Okay? So once again, we're using logic. Before we can form an opinion, before we can come up with a conjecture, we have to have a reason why we believe that. And sometimes the way that we can come up to that opinion is by looking at some patterns and some examples.